So we're going to look at the differences between these two Borg-Warner turbos. So we've got two twin scroll Borg-Warner turbos, one EFR, one SX200. This is a 76-70 EFR, and then we've got an S252. We're going to show you the differences between them on the bench and show you why there's such a big price difference in turbos. These are two very similar sized turbos, both basically the same frame sizes, pretty much the same wheel sizes, so these on the bench look, to most people, you know, the same turbo. So as we already covered, with the SX200, you are limited to the Marmon flange and a T3 twin scroll turbine inlet, although we've now ported this one out to T4 sizing to match our external gate manifold, our kind of off-the-shelf manifold. So that solves that problem. Obviously the Marmon flanges can be tricky to get to seal well, but again, we're hopeful that it'll be fine, and that's part of the testing process anyway. Plenty of people use these with the Marmon flange and don't have issues. Some people have had issues in the past, so just rather get rid of the Marmon flange straight away. So we'll just see how it goes in that respect, really. So these are a watered down EFR, basically. These have been kind of born from an EFR. So there's no water cooling. It's a full journal bearing turbo. So water cooling is not really required. It's essentially oil cooled and lubricated. Then they've got pretty much the same kind of EFR compressor wheel, anti-surge housing. In fact, for some turbos, some of the smaller EFRs, people actually fit this compressor cover. So like the 6.2 and the 6.758 EFR, people actually fit this compressor cover to them because of the anti-surge. It's got threads tapped already for a boost or vacuum takeoff for the boost control solenoid or whatever boost controller you're running, but it's not drilled. So it's because, you know, you might want to mount it elsewhere, but the EFR basically comes pre-drilled for that. It is tapped. You basically just need to just run a drill through it, basically, and then the same for the speed sensor. So again, just like on the EFR, it's got a speed sensor port. It just needs drilling through into the compressor cover. So if we now look at the EFR, you can kind of see where they start to differ. So the compressor cover straight away is a little bit busier. We've got more stuff on the outside here. We've got a built-in recirculation valve, which is probably one of the nicest features, to be honest. It's one of the things that drew us to using these turbos in the first place when we first started using the EFRs for the twin scroll internal gate kit, was because of how kind of OEM they are. With this in the engine bay and these kinds of built-in features, they almost look like a turbo that would come from factory. So yeah, built-in recirculation valve, which is really nice because they're just as reliable as any other OE recirculation valve. And if you've got to do that pipe work externally, like we do with the Garrett kits, and we're going to do with Justin's kit, we've got to have that 25mm Turbo Smart recirculation valve externally. It just adds in a lot of extra pipe work. So we'll need a takeoff on the inlet manifold, we'll need a takeoff on the boost pipe. With it all built in, it just makes everything so much easier. You are basically just getting rid of loads of extra pipe work, and just making it a lot nicer kind of OEM fit. The other point is obviously they've got a boost control solenoid bolted onto the outside and a mount for it. So the SX200 doesn't have that mount, the EFR does, and comes with one. So for our kind of Vauxhall applications, this is great. You just plumb it up off to your wastegate and off to your intake, and you can just plug the Vauxhall loom straight in and they are ready to run. So again, it saves adding in that extra control solenoid you've got to mount somewhere. Just makes things look a little bit neater. So as I was talking about before with the compressor cover vacuum or boost outlet on the EFR, again, that's basically plumbed in, ready to go, because it's already plumbed into the boost control solenoid. If we flip these turbos over now, we can start to look in a bit more detail at what goes on behind the pretty bits, really. So the EFR compressor cover is held on by a big V-band, which again, you loosen that one V-band and you can clock and rotate that compressor cover however you like, and you just tweak that V-band up again and it's good to go. On the SXE, we've got like 10 bolts around the outside, which it's not bad. It's just not as nice, not quite as refined. There's more machining work in doing it this way. It just costs more to manufacture, hence the higher price. So a lot of these features are nice, but not really required, especially if you're not looking to kind of go to the extremes of having, I guess, like a turbo that looks OEM. Most people are quite happy to have a turbo that is looks like it's been kind of bolted on off something else. It is a big turbo. A lot of people want that kind of look and that feel to how their car operates, how their engine bay looks. So stuff like this, it's nice, but it's not really an essential. Once you've fitted it, you're probably never going to need to adjust it ever again. So, yeah, is it worth paying extra for? Probably not. We've got the coolant port, so we've got two on either side, so you can have the inlet and the outlet either side or both sides if you want. And then they come with a built-in oil restrictor. So you don't need, like we would do on the Garrett kits, traditionally we'd run a 1mm restrictor for the oil feed. You don't need that on the EFRs. They've basically got their own kind of built-in one. So again, that's kind of like a bit of a plus on EFRs over Garrett's. When it comes to the turbine housing, it's bolted on in much the same way as the SX200 is, or SX300, whichever you want to talk about. Yeah, they're bolted on pretty much the same way. Have the kind of core clamps which rotate round. On these ones, it's like a strap. But yeah, there's not much difference in that respect. When it comes to the actual material, these ones are a fully investment cast stainless steel turbine housing, so no rust. They look good forever, which is a bit of a plus point in the engine bay. Obviously, if it's quite aesthetic to have something that looks nice and new. Obviously, it'll change with colour and heat over time, but it will stay looking a lot nicer than what the normal kind of cast iron turbine housing would on the SX200. And then obviously we've got like 90-degree edges in here, which is not really, in terms of gas flow, you don't really want 90-degree edges because that causes like big disturbances in gas flow. Essentially, you end up with like vortexes inside these 90 degrees. And again, when we're looking at the very top end of performance, this kind of thing starts to let you down. But realistically, are most people going to those kinds of levels? They're not really. Very few people are looking to extract every 1 and 2% out of the performance of their turbo. So on the EFR, everything's nicely rounded, coming up to the V-band flange, so we've got a real nice radius on there. And again, gas flow loves a radius. So the bigger that radius is, the faster and the straighter you allow that gas to travel out of the turbine housing. And like we know with turbo cars, the best exhaust or downpipe is no exhaust and downpipe. And you want the least amount of back pressure possible. You want to be able to let that turbine wheel do its job, that gas coming in, spinning that turbine and getting rid of that gas as quickly as possible, because as the turbine speeds up, the engine is speeding up, and that's when you start to get those top end restrictions. The turbo starts to choke out. Basically, we can't get that gas out of the turbine quick enough. Usually that's down to turbine AR rather than actual wheel restrictions, because the smaller your AR is, the less lag you're going to have. But once the engine is at maximum RPM, that's when we want to get that gas out as quick as possible to put the least, to allow the turbine wheel to remain in its efficiency range. We want to be able to get that gas out as quick as possible. So those kinds of radiuses, allowing the gas to come out in a much smoother path, much more gas out, much faster, do gain you those nominal percentages on top of your 500, 600, 700 horsepower. The SX200 is obviously a more industrial type turbo, and they're using industrial type turbine housings, hence the Marmon flange. They're not necessarily looking to improve on every aspect of performance. So we've got, you know, like 90-degree edges here where the V-band flange goes. So it's obviously not the best in terms of all-out performance. But again, it really depends how far do you want to go. What kind of levels are you looking for? Those extra 5% performance gains on top of 500 horsepower? Are you quite happy to have 500? You know, these are the kind of extremes that an EFR will do that maybe an SX200 will lose out on. Again, these have got a Gamma TI turbine wheel, which is essentially a lot lighter than the normal cast iron turbine wheel. So that aids response, which you end up with a car that drives basically a bit better. On paper, it's probably quite a lot, maybe like 30-40% response over a normal turbine wheel. But when it comes to actually on the dyno, on the car, that doesn't equate to 30 or 40% better response, because you've got all the inefficiencies of the engine it's bolted onto to take into account as well. So we might have, you know, 30-40% on paper, but actually on the engine you're not really looking at 30-40%. Again, wild guesstimation, but maybe 5 to 10% at the very most over having this Gamma TI turbine wheel, especially on a Z20. Realistically, most people, an SX200 is all they need. Again, so far we're kind of untested on the Z20 engine, so that's what Justin's going to be doing. We're going to be seeing how far we can take this, what we can get out of it. Never been tried, as far as I know, on a Z20 engine yet. If it has, you know, please let us know, because I'd love to know how you got on with it, and we can then compare it to Justin's results. But they're really well proven on other cars, so we're excited to give it a try, compare it to the EFR that we've now got quite a bit of data on other setups we've done. So yeah, it'll be interesting to know what it can do, because we can probably produce a kit for about £1,000 less, or maybe more than £1,000 less than an EFR. And if we can get very similar performance out of it, then it's a bit of a win-win, really. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. If there's anything else you want to know, put it in the comments below.